Good evening, everyone. I am now calling the meeting to order. It's June 1st, 2021. And I now call to order tonight's council meeting for the town of Los Gatos. So if we could do roll call, please.
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Risto.
Here.
Councilmember Hudas.
Here.
Councilmember Badami.
Here.
Vice Mayor Rennie.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Sayoc.
Here. All is present, so we begin our proceedings at 7:01. And before we begin with the business that is on hand for tonight's agenda, we do have several presentations tonight. Usually the first meeting in June, we have an opportunity to welcome our outgoing commissioners and thank them for their service, the youth commissioners that serve the town of Los Gatos. And we have an opportunity to welcome through consent our incoming commissioners as well. Prior to this meeting, we had a study session with 20 members of our community who shared with us the fabulous work that they have been doing on our behalf. They truly are inspiring and the next leaders of our town. So I look forward to seeing what they do next. But many of the things that they do include providing recommendations on youth-friendly businesses of the year, as well as youth-friendly green business of the year. And so before I get to that, I do want to recognize 12 youth commissioners that are outgoing, seniors that will be leaving our community so that they can pursue their post-high school goals. And one at a time, I'll call their name. Normally we do this in council chambers and we have an opportunity to welcome and thank them for their service in person, but we'll have to do it over Zoom tonight. And I hope that those that are present will have an opportunity to at least turn on their video and accept our gracious gratitude for all the work they've done. So Vicky Bay, Paula Bernholz, and please correct me if I'm mispronouncing any names. Silpa Chinikotla, who also happens to be CERT certified. And so I'm looking for someone that will be replacing her, hint, hint. Emily Choi, Isabella Debling, another of our youth commissioners, CERT certified as well. Shreya Desai, Jake Hakim, Adam Moore, Faris Raza, Sasha Rue, Robert Stanley, and Anjali Vaidya. And again, for the 12 of you, thank you for your service. Thank you for all the work that you've done. And thank you for being the inspiration that many of us need right now at this moment. And so with that, I turn to both to our chair of the Youth Commission, Sasha Rue, as well as her commissioners, who will now be presenting the 2 awards that they provide the town on an annual basis. So Chair Rue.
Hi, thank you so much, Mayor Sayoc. Thank you so much, everybody who's here tonight. Super honored to announce on behalf of the Youth Commission that our youth-friendly business of the year is Posh Bagel. Yay! One of my personal favorites, the best service. Whenever I go there, like from classes, they're always like, oh, don't worry about like getting all the change out of your backpack, just the sweetest place to go and visit. Yeah, we at the commission just love the business, and we love that we can honor them in some way for continuing to be a great source of happiness during the pandemic. And now for our environmentally friendly business, the company or the business that we chose is Trader Joe's. They have been doing so many cool initiatives with trying to reduce their waste. They also encourage environmentally friendly eating in our town. They're a great place to go and visit, great place for young people to work. So we're just super honored that we get to recognize them as well.
Wonderful. And on behalf, let's start with Posh Bagel. On behalf of Posh Bagel, I know that Peter is here to accept the award. So we've shown what that looks like visually, but Peter, if you don't mind turning on your award, your video, and if you'd like to say anything, please, this is your time. Thank you.
I try to turn on my video, it doesn't start. Who has disabled? So I don't know what happened.
Okay.
Okay. So, well, I hope you can hear me, but well, I appreciate very much and thank you for your support, for all the support from the students that been coming here. That's you know, we are so blessed that they are still supporting us, and we are very much appreciate you know, all the community around here that come to help us during this pandemic. And we're still standing up because of them. And we are so thankful that you are still supporting us. Thank you so much. I very much, you know, appreciate for all the things that they helping us. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you and congratulations for the youth-friendly business.
Thank you.
And on behalf of the environmentally friendly business for Trader Joe's, I believe Lee Stewart is present to accept that award. And I don't see Lee on my screen.
So he's a call-in, but
Okay.
now I have two phone numbers and neither one of them is the one that I see. So Jackie can.
So we can ask Jackie to deliver
Yes.
that on our behalf. Well,
So one of them, Jackie,
Hi,
can you tell me the last four so I know which one of these is Lee?
absolutely. The phone number is 0617.
Okay, and I don't see either one of those as one of our two call-ins.
Well, I can tell you if that they are very excited about it receiving the award, and they look forward to working with the students throughout the year on anything environmentally friendly. And I will pass along that I said thank you very much to the kids and to the community for the award.
thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
And thank you, Youth Commission, for nominating two of our businesses and for the work that they continue to do, especially during the pandemic. We also have an opportunity, it's under consent, to welcome 12 new commissioners onto our Youth Commission. So for those that are in attendance, this is a first civics lesson. Usually items on consent do not get pulled and so will not be heard. It's because we think that they will just get approved automatically. And so that just means that you'll have an opportunity to go and turn off your screens and finish off the last of the week. I know this is a busy school year, but for those that have been nominated, appointed, and will be ratified for our Youth Commission, thank you for volunteering to step up, and we look forward to working with you. So congratulations to those that have been appointed. And thank you, Vice Mayor, for participating in those interview panels. So great job, everyone, and enjoy the last week of school.
Thank you.
And we now move to council manager matters. And so let's begin with Vice Mayor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll start off maybe a little bit on a downer note. The most important thing I did was attend the gathering of the VTA board members to honor the victims of the families and the survivors of the light rail maintenance yard mass shooting. If with your indulgence, if we had a few minutes of silence.
Yes, please.
So our thoughts and prayers go out to the families and the survivors of the mass shooting. In addition to that, I attended the Bay Area Air Quality Management Legislative Committee, the Mobile Source Committee, and the Technology Implementation Office Steering Committee. I also attended on 5/19 the police swearing in and promotions. Congratulations to all of those that were promoted and to our new hires. And I particularly want to highlight, I'm proud that our police department has promoted a woman to captain, number two. I guess we have two number twos, but I'm proud that we have a woman promoted to number two. And it looks like we now have 4 women sworn officers. The last I was counting, we had 2. So We're increasing our diversity with the number of women, so proud of that also. In addition, I attended the Housing Trust Investor briefing on 5/20, and on 5/25, the Community Health and Senior Services Commission met to kind of deliberate on all of the presentations that we had. And we'll be bringing something to the council soon. Thank you.
Very much so. Councilmember Risto.
Thank you. I attended or was part of the general plan committee meeting along with Councilmember Badami. We met last week, and the only item on the agenda was discussing the application form and enabling resolution documents similar to all other commissions that are discussing those. And so those recommendations will be coming forth to the town council for consideration. The policy committee met and we discussed, the only item on the agenda was a potential rescission of the Los Gatos Boulevard plan. And that plan was put in place in 1997, I believe. And part of the discussion was parts of it are very much out of date, and other parts of that plan, either portions of them are already under consideration for the general plan 2040 and can be implemented as part of that, or can become part of other policies that we have. So those recommendations went forward. Staff is looking at which parts of the general plan are just inherently outdated, as we had discussed, and which parts are already covered in our general plan 2040. And we'll get some feedback on how we can mesh that together and make it work. A lot of what was in the Los Gatos general plan, or Los Gatos Boulevard plan, is also going to be part of the plans for the place districts. And so instead of making it specific to one area, there are a variety of areas of town where those kinds of changes and issues will be discussed. Along with the vice mayor, the mayor, and council member Badami, I was also at the Los Gatos Monte Sereno Police Department swearing in and promotion ceremony. And I was honored to be there and to see the strong representation we have with our community policing. And I'm very optimistic for the future. This past month was Bike Month, and on Saturday the 22nd, the town had sponsored a Energizer station, which was a place where any cyclists coming by, it was promoted, but cyclists came by. We had information about the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, about safe routes to school, about a variety of bike initiatives. And we had a great staffing that day. I was representing the town council, but we had members from the Complete Streets Commission and from Safe Routes to School. And we had quite a few people stop by and talk, including a number of families. And one family was a family of 5 on 2 e-bikes, e-cargo bikes. And so they were getting around just fine without a car and transporting their 3 kids on their 2 bikes. So that was inspiring. And I'd say we probably had a little over 100 cyclists come by. So I think Los Gatos knows how to move on 2 wheels. And then, let me see. Oh, the last item is today I met with 2 representatives from Boys Team Charity. They wanted to discuss an initiative for a litter cleanup program in the town. And we're looking at next steps to move forward. So I think we'll be hearing a lot about that. Anyway, thank you.
Councilmember Risto. Councilmember Badami.
Thank you. On May 19th, I attended the swearing-in ceremony at Calvary Church for newly appointed and promoted officers of the Los Gatos Monte Sereno Police Department. And on May 26th, I attended a meeting of the General Plan Committee along with Councilmember Risto.
Councilmember Badami. Councilmember Hudis.
Thank you. Had a relatively light couple of weeks. Other than meeting with the town manager and the police chief, I didn't have any other external meetings. I did have a question for the town attorney or the town manager. Since it sounds like the policy committee made a recommendation on a land use item, is that correct? And is it going to the planning commission or the council, the recommendations?
Town Manager Pravetti, would you like to answer that? And then Town Attorney Schultz? I defer to
Certainly.
you.
Thank you. So the motion that the policy committee adopted was to recommend the rescission of the Los Gatos Boulevard plan. The decision to rescind will come directly to the town council. The second part of the motion was to determine if any of the policies and guidelines in that plan should live on in either the new general plan or in other planning documents. So planning staff is currently doing that evaluation, and any recommended changes to those planning documents would first go to the Planning Commission, and then the Planning Commission's recommendation would then come to the town council for consideration. Thank you.
And Mr. Schultz, would you like to add anything else?
Nope, the town manager handled it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schultz. Anything else to report, Mr. Hudis?
Oh, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. And what I want to report, in addition to what has already been shared, the Cities Association did have their general membership meeting, and there was a interracial, interjustice, interreligious panel. West Valley mayors and managers, both Town Manager Pravetti and I participated, where we heard from Larry Stone, our Santa Clara County assessor, on his predictions for post-COVID economic recovery. And on behalf of the council, I also participated with the Los Gatos Memorial Park, where we honored our service members who died in action for Memorial Day holiday. And to echo what Vice Mayor Rennie said, it's a time to remember those that have served in all capacities, whether it's through public service or through the military, and honor the work they do by moving our country and our community forward in the best ways we know how. So I appreciate your attending VTA and honoring and recognizing those families. So Town Manager Pravetti.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Just a couple of announcements tonight. On Monday, June 7th, will be the installation of the new public art on the median along Highway 9 between Alberto Way and Los Gatos Boulevard. So after the morning of June 7th, look for a new cat in town. And then on June 21st, we're continuing with free COVID testing. Of course, we're encouraging everyone to get vaccinated, but it's still very important to also do the testing, so that way we know where we stand as our county. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we now move to our consent items. And so just as a reminder for the youth commissioners and their families that are in attendance, I know item number 2 lists the recommendations of ratification for the youth commissioners that have been appointed. And so we will have an opportunity once that gets ratified to swear in all of our incoming youth commissioners. And again, congratulations. But first, I want to go to my council to see if there is anyone on council who would like to pull an item on our consent. So, Councilmember Hudis?
Yes, I'd like to request that we pull item number 4, the budget, from consent.
Item number 4 will be pulled. And I should clarify, because I know that I've been questioned. What that means is that we will just remove it from the consent agenda, and that it will be heard as a regular public hearing with full public testimony and a staff report. Item number 4 will be heard, and we will listen to that after item 12 tonight. And I now turn to our public, those in attendance. And is there an item that someone would like to remove from our consent agenda so that it could be heard as a full public hearing? I see no hands raised, so I'm closing our public testimony. I turn to the council for a motion to approve all items under consent except item number 4. And Councilmember Badami.
I move to approve consent items 1, 2, and 3, and 5 through 9.
Okay, and can I have a second? Councilmember Risto?
I'll second that motion.
Are there any questions or comments to the motion? Mayor Rennie.
Aye.
I also vote aye into the consent agenda, exclusive of number 4, passes unanimously. And again, congratulations to the youth commissioners that have been appointed. We now move to verbal communications, and this is an opportunity for anyone in the public to speak to an item that is not listed on our public hearing. Tonight, we are hearing brush abatement and proposed modifications that have been forwarded by the policy committee and the budget. If you would like to speak to us on something that is not related to those 4 items, raise your hand. I'll be calling on you and we'll move you over and you'll have 3 minutes to make your comments. Just a reminder, these are items that will not be brought for discussion, but more for us to listen and if appropriate, ask staff to follow up. First speaker is Eden Berg.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You have to remove listen, learn, grow, change signs from our town. In fact, I am shocked to see that they are still up and to my disgust, spreading to other towns. This tells me one of 2 things. Either you are entirely oblivious and uneducated on the current socialistic takeover happening in this country, or you are complicit in spreading divisive poison, and neither of those 2 options are acceptable for the children and future generations of this town, California, or the United States of America. Do not insult our intelligence by throwing around names like Stanford or Berkeley to back your research. Tertiary institutions have been hotbeds for critical race theory and propaganda for the last 20 to 30 years. For those of you complicit, you should be ashamed. You have sold out the children of this town and you are a traitor to this country. Do not be so naive to think the resentment of your victim oppressor narrative will not visit your neighborhood. Its anger and evil will burn down your town, your libraries, and your churches. Ladies and gentlemen, I do not have children of my own, but if I did, I would remove my children from the public school systems until this poison is removed from our curriculum, schools, libraries, communities, and institutions. The Anti-Racism Coalition, that is the most disgusting racist thing I have heard. We will not be lied to. We are united as human beings. Love always draws us together. Stop spreading this divisive poison. A large group of diverse people with roots from all across the globe are telling you that they're experiencing the signs and symptoms of unspeakable looming disaster. It is time you paid attention. Stop identity politics now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Cindy.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Good evening. I would like to highlight some of the comparisons between the Los Gatos Town Council's political agenda and the CCP. The Chinese Communist Party uses psychological warfare operations and other forms of subversion to strangle us within our own systems. They use controversial issues to cause chaos and use it against their enemies. The Los Gatos Town Council has followed the lead of the CCP and implemented critical race theory and diversity, equity, and inclusion, also known as CRT and DEI propaganda throughout the entire town with signs, flyers, and mixers to divide the town by race. The CCP sets up state-run media in our country and uses it to lie to the population and spread their propaganda. They control big tech and censor free speech, and the town of Los Gatos has followed suit by failing to provide a platform or voice to conservatives, Christians, or any other opposing communist views. The CCP brings in state-run companies that can sell below cost and put our companies out of business. The Los Gatos Town Council, as well as the county and state, shut down most small businesses due to the fake pandemic, while knowing big businesses like Amazon and Walmart would hit record sales. The CCP takes over every industry. They get into our government via school boards, town councils, and nonprofits, just as a few examples. They even have spies that engage in inappropriate behaviors with our representatives like Eric Swalwell. And then our government praises him by putting him on the Intelligence Committee. The Chinese Communist Party uses 3 types of warfare in their military system: psychological, media, and legal. For example, they use our media to control how we interpret the information regarding the Wuhan flu. They use fear tactics to get into our psyche and then use our legal system to control our ability to talk about controversial issues. For example, by making it illegal to refer to the virus as the China virus as if that's racist. The town of Los Gatos then builds on that to implement their newest Asian hate campaign, causing more racial divide and less freedom of speech. It is important that the people of Los Gatos and California in general recognize communism when it creeps into our own towns. We must speak out against this very destructive agenda to destroy America from within. I'm asking the council of the town of Los Gatos to prove your loyalty to your constituents and our country by removing all identity-driven politics from our towns and schools immediately and begin listening to everyone in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Doug.
Hello, thanks for giving me the chance to talk on this very important issue. I would encourage you to immediately remove listen, learn, change, grow. As I said in the last meeting, I've seen the list of books on the website and it's just all negative about our country, and it's not helping. It's not helping unite us, it's dividing us. Promotion of segregation based on color of skin, focus only on the worst part of American history, and erasing positive history and heroes is terrible. It doesn't make any sense. Why do you support such malarkey? We need heroes like our founding fathers and warriors from our wars against tyranny. We are the good guys. If you don't know history, if you don't teach history in our schools, and you teach this sort of hate, you're gonna reap what you sow, and it won't be pretty. They'll come for you next. You can't satisfy a mob, and if you stir up a mob, that is exactly what will happen. French Revolution shows that. Focus on opening businesses and reducing resistance to customers spending their money. That's your job. Again, please remove these signs in your public support of this social agenda. It only separates us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, C. Roy.
Hello, Town Council and distinguished Mayor Syak. Want to comment on agenda item 4. Basically, before I do that, want to also say congratulations to the youth commissioners appointed. I hope they're listening.
Roy, real quick, item agenda 4 is being moved to after 12, and so save your comments for then.
Can I continue along the vein of the other speakers that commented?
Yes.
Okay. So wanted to state that we want to hold Catherine Summers of the Los Gatos Chamber accountable, yourself, Honored Mayor Syak, and as well as the council members for violating the 1964 Civil Rights Act by implementing race-based campaigns to quote unquote change the town of Los Gatos in a frightening new way. We need to take CRT out of our town and our schools. As many other states are outlawing this CRT as a clearly biased, racial, and violence invoking policy, we need to follow suit with those other states. We need to remove the identity politics. The other commenters have said that very clearly. And want to just review briefly some of the central tenets of critical race theory, CRT. The centrality of race and racism in society is that CRT asserts racism is a permanent component of American life. So what that is saying is you are permanently creating this class. You do not want to improve society and move on and build a better and bigger future for Los Gatos and our community. Another tenet is the challenge to dominant ideology. CRT challenges the claims of neutrality, objectivity, colorblindness, and meritocracy in society. Wow. If you're challenging objectivity, then you have no standard. You have purely based subjectivity. If you're replacing color blindness, then you're promoting racism. And if you have no meritocracy, how do you ever rate anybody fairly and with neutrality? This is clearly against everything you appear to stand for. So I have to ask the question, why are you supporting this listen, learn, change, grow, which is clearly straight out of the CRT dogma, something straight out of the heart of communism? And we just need to look at the history of communism, the 20th century, 100 to 200 million deaths. Where is the shame? Where is the justice? Where is the social justice for that? You might say that you have an objective standard you're pursuing, but God weighs the heart and he knows what your true intent is. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Pat.
Good evening, Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. I would like to request you to reconsider putting this very divisive agenda that you are trying to foist on the town of Los Gatos. It is very important not to divide the society for whatever agenda you are trying to promote. It's way better if you start uniting the people, talk about every American, irrespective of their skin color, race, religion. We all have to think we are Americans and stop this agenda of dividing each other. Um, it is very hard to figure out what kind of reasons might be promoting you, but it could be anybody's guess that either you are afraid of the mob or you are doing it purely to get elected. In either case, these are not good things. It would serve you much better if you unite the people and talk about the good things of America. It is the beacon of liberty. It attracts the best and brightest from every part of the world. It is seen as the best example of a country that has succeeded. We do not want to dismantle the best country that humankind has produced. So it would be much better if you talk about all the positive things about American culture and unite the Americans rather than dividing each other like you are doing now. Yeah, it is really important that you listen to so many people from diverse backgrounds speaking out against this very racist and divisive agenda called critical race theory. It is nothing but the divide and rule policies that have been used by all these colonial powers, the communists, to divide the people and rule them. And people will see, people are seeing it. It is right in front of everyone's eyes. So do not think that, by your sweet talk of listen, grow, and change, whatever you are trying to say, people are not aware. Everyone is very aware of what you are doing. So listen to all these pleas from so many to take this out. So please take this out, and promote good things about America. Talk about all Americans as one and stop dividing us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Joseph.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay. Please stop the racism. I don't know what's gotten into all of you. When I was a young child, I used to think, what would happen if I were alive during the days of slavery? If I were alive during the days of the Third Reich, the Russian Revolution, the Ku Klux Klan? These were all very, very, very popular, social, politically correct ideologies years ago, practiced at the various highest levels of our society, of our nation, of other nations. Racism is wrong. And if you're pushing racism, then you're a racist. You're turning our society into a racist culture. You're embedding it into our laws, into our education. A racist laws, racist government, racist education, racist politicians. If you push racism, you're a racist politician, you're a racist person. There's wonderful terms they use: listen, learn, grow. Well, Nazis use terms like listening and learning and growing. The Ku Klux Klan used terms like listening, learning, growing. The Hutus, the Tutsis. And I beg your pardon, someone got very upset one time on the board because someone used the term about the Nazis. Well, they had extended to terminate my race at a particular year. They hated a whole lot of people. I think we should look at all examples throughout history of how evil these ideologies, these societal individuals want. They all use the term political correctness. They all use the term social correctness. These are not new terms. These are not new theories. It's dressed up in some new way to justify racism. Please, each one of you, look into your hearts. Do you want to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I'm a racist? No, you may not want to say it, but you'll have to say it. You'll have to see yourself for the racist that you are, the racism that you're espousing, the racism that you're pushing. If there's some amazingly good reason to push such racism, I'd like to hear it. There's not. We're in one of the least racist countries, societies that history has ever had. People want to look and dig up stuff from eons ago, decades ago, hundreds of years ago to justify the racism. Racists always want to justify the racism, and they drag up things from the past to justify the racism. Please stop justifying your individual racisms. Please put an end to racism. Do not amplify and create more racism. Stop the racism. Stop the racism. Stop your individual racisms. Stop being racists. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is Y. Wieslack.
For allowing me this opportunity to speak. I would also like to say what the previous speakers have said, that you are only creating more racism. There is no racism. There is no systematic racism. You are creating it. So you need to remove the signs and you need to remove CRT from your agenda. And just as the gentleman said before, you are the racist. You all are creating racism. I used to wonder, how did what happened in Germany with the Nazis happen? What was it with the Germans, that what they did to the Jews and other people, killing them? Now I know why, because of what you are all doing. And yes, I want to know how you look in the mirrors at yourselves and you create this agenda, you're creating this division, you're hating a group of people just like the Jews did, and you're hating whites and they're supposed to feel sorry for themselves. I think you're all self-loathing, those of you who are Caucasian and hating yourselves. And Rob, I don't appreciate your smiling, Rob Rennie. All of you are guilty. Remove your signs that promote racism and instead promote Americans and promote the fact that we are this melting pot, we've always been, and stop this socialist agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Suzanne.
Hi there, good evening. I don't really have much prepared. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm on my iPhone, so I'm a little unfamiliar with Zoom in that way. First of all, I just wanted to say that I agree with every speaker before me. I do not understand why anyone would push CRT, because that is in essence what you're pushing. It's racist and you should all be ashamed of yourselves. I venture to guess that most of you have come from another country or your parents did. Most of you understand what socialism is. I lived under socialism. My father lived under the Nazi invasion when they marched into Denmark and took it over. I've heard horror stories. People had no choice. They had to do what they were told. And you're trying to do that to us. And I want to know why. Why do you think you have the power to push racism? The other thing I wanted to comment on was this diversity baloney that I don't know who it was talked about, that there was now a woman police chief and now you had 4 women. What woman wants to have a job because she's a woman? People should be hired because of who they are and what they can do, not because they're Black, they're white, they're orange, they're gay, they're LGBT, or anything else, but based on their ability. And you're pushing this agenda is basically dividing America, dividing our town, and I don't appreciate it. The one other thing I wanted to comment on is pushing the vaccine. Are you all doctors? Are you aware the vaccine is not approved? It's emergency use only. I bet you none of you have done any real research on the vaccine, and you're sitting there promoting it and saying how great people should get vaccinated. You should all be ashamed of yourselves. Get off your chairs, go do some research. Why don't you try listening to the doctors who were all silenced? Did you ever wonder why they were silenced? I just think it's disgraceful that you all sit up there and have no information. So I encourage you to do some real research, not only on the vaccine, but CRT, and maybe you should get a refresher course in World War II and Hitler. Thank you.
Next speaker is Lily Hogan.
Thank you for letting me speak tonight. The definition of racism is the belief that all members of a certain race possess characteristics specific to that race. Certainly, this is true to a point. This becomes a problem only when thinking that all members of a certain race possess characteristics specific to that race so as to distinguish it as inferior or superior to another race, such as all white people are racist. The people of Los Gatos do not judge others by the color of their skin. Instead, the town government, each of you, is being racist by judging the people of Los Gatos as racist simply because they are white and demanding that we all change into your version of what you think the white people of Los Gatos should think and behave. You are making white the new Jew. Shame on you. By implementing a racist agenda which is already destroying people, families, and children, you are participating in crimes against humanity. Critical race theory is being banned all over the country. It will be banned here in California. This town council is being given an opportunity to say no to the very evil Martin Luther King Jr. fought against. You must take critical race theory out of this town now. If you do not do as your constituents want, you will be voted out of office for good. We are educating this town and people are waking up. They are getting scared and angry. The town's racist Listen, Learn, Change, Grow is illegal in violation of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And it is racist at its core, and it is critical race theory based. Black Lives Matter states that it is a global organization whose mission is to eradicate white supremacy in all white people. This is what this town council promotes in our library, museums, and town flags. This town council wants to do away with the white people of Los Gatos. This is unacceptable. We love everyone in this town. It doesn't matter rich or poor, Black or white. It doesn't matter if you're a Jew or a Catholic, or it doesn't matter. Nothing matters, but we love everybody, unlike you. No one wants this in our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Kai.
Hello? Hello?
Hello? You have 3
Hi,
minutes.
oh, hi. I'm sorry. I'm driving. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, but you probably shouldn't drive while you're on the phone.
Oh, no, it's okay. I'm on the Bluetooth. Anyway, thank you for having us tonight. I have a question. Do you believe in the civil rights movement and what Martin Luther King fought and died for? You don't have to answer it, but I think we all agree what he fight for. He said, I had a dream that my four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. You are preaching the exact opposite. You are the very racist that he fought against. Is that how you want history and your community to view you? Because this is exactly who you are. Racist. Please stop this agenda. I am so sick and tired of it. Thank you.
Next speaker is Quincy. If we could move Quincy over and then move Kai back as a attendee.
Hi, I just have a quick comment I would like to make, but I disagree with everyone who has spoken before. And as a member of the youth in our town, I would like to say that I, for one, like the listen, learn, and grow signs posted around town. And I don't think that any of the actions that the council has taken are racist. And I think that the signs are just a good reminder for everyone to learn and educate about the topics going on around the world. And I, for one, do not think that any of these actions are racist.
Thank you. And I see no other speakers that have their hand raised. And so I will close tonight's verbal communication as evidenced by our allowance of speakers to speak. We honor all those who would like to share their views. And I rely on Mr. Schultz, our town attorney, to please guide us if there is ever anything that is illegal that is being done by this government. So, Ms. Neitz?
There is one more person who's raised their hand.
Okay. Karen is our last speaker. As always, we limit our verbal communications in the beginning to 30 minutes, and those who would like to speak afterwards can do so at the end. Karen.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, it wasn't unmuting. I am just wanting to say, get rid of this critical race theory. All it does is divide people. The fact that white people are bad because they're born white and have absolutely no choice about it is absurd. You're condemning people because of the way that they're born or the color of their skin, with a choice that they have absolutely no control over. Nothing. I know one thing, until those signs or banners or whatever you want to call them come down in Los Gatos, my friends, my family, and myself will not do business anywhere in Los Gatos. That's it. That's all I have to say. Oh, and as far as the vaccine, you guys are pushing, it's not a vaccine. Go to the Moderna website. It calls it a gene modifying therapy. It doesn't even call it a vaccine. You guys really need to do your research on what this poison shot is. And that's it.
And any other speakers? Seeing no other hands raised, I'm closing verbal communications. And we now go towards those items that are on our agenda for tonight. First item is item number 10, which is a brush abatement program.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. My name is Stephanie Hockemeyer with the Parks and Public Works Department. The brush abatement program item before you tonight has the recommended action of 1, conducting a public hearing to note objections of property owners having their name on the list of properties that are non-compliant in removing brush, and 2, ordering the abatement of public nuisance and potential fire hazard pursuant to the Town of Los Gatos Muni Code Chapter 9 regarding defensible space. Please note that there's a desk item in front of you that contains a revised non-compliant list with 3 parcels. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And we also have Curtis Rule from the Santa Clara County Fire Department with us.
Thank you, Stephanie, and welcome, Curtis. Council members, are there any questions based on what is in our staff report or on our addendum? Yes, Vice Mayor Rennie.
I just wanted to make sure I was clear. So we got an addendum with now only 3 people on the list, and there was a larger one in our original. So it's been changed to 3 people. It was taken care of except for these 3, just so I'm clear.
That's right. They the Santa Clara County Fire Department did the last check, I believe it was Thursday or Friday, and a few had complied since then.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other council members have questions? Seeing none, I will allow our public to speak to this item as it is a public hearing. So I'm opening our public comment time. I see no hands raised. Closing public testimony. Bring this back to council for questions or a motion. Councilmember Badami.
This is an easy one. Wildfire season is here. Let's not waste any time on this. So I'm going to make a motion and move to order abatement of the public nuisance and potential fire hazard pursuant to the Town of Los Gatos Municipal Code, Chapter 9, regarding defensible space on parcels itemized in Attachment 4.
And do I have a second? Councilmember Risto seconds.
Yep, I second.
Okay. Any questions to the motion? Seeing none, Councilmember Badami.
Aye.
Councilmember Hudis.
Aye.
Councilmember Risto.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Rennie.
Aye.
I also vote aye. It passes unanimously. And thank you, Stephanie and Curtis, for joining us and making this an easy one.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. We now move to item number 11. And let me just move there. Which is a proposed modification to the agenda format and rules policy as recommended by the Council Policy Committee. I will allow Ms. Neese to provide the staff report tonight.
Thank you and good evening. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. The Policy Committee discussed the proposed modifications to the Commission appointment policy outlined in the staff report in Attachment 1 and is recommending the Council adopt the modifications. The commissioner terms vary depending on the board, commission, or committee, ranging from 3 to 5 years, and terms expire on a rotating basis, with 2 terms expiring per year. If there are no vacancies, there are 2 vacancies every year for those boards, commissions, and committees with an even number of adult commissioners. And for those that have an uneven number, there is 1 vacancy per year. The Planning Commission has 2 vacancies per year for 3 years, and then 1 vacancy because they have 7 members. This makes having at least 2 incumbents on each board, commission, or committee a viable option for the term limit modification that is suggested. This concludes my staff report, and if staff is available to answer any questions in addition to the Policy Committee members. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Risto, as chair of the committee, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I'm sorry. So I'm looking at item 11. Is that the right report for item 11?
I'm sorry, I think I gave number
Item
12 first. Sorry.
Well, you know what, let's do, if
Yeah.
it's okay, and if it's legal, Mr. Schultz, can we just move this to item 12? We're doing item 12. And any comments to the staff report of item 12 and what Ms. Neese has presented?
Yes, thank you. So for this item, I think, for the adult commissions, we decided, because the council and the community at large decided there should be term limits for the town council, it seemed to make sense to look at that for the adult commissions. And so we're mirroring the term limits that we have for the adult commissions, where you could serve 2 terms, be off for a term, and then be on again. And that seemed to make sense. We got positive input on that. In terms of the youth commission, we turned that over to the youth commission to get their input. And given that they only can potentially be on it 8th grade to 12th, they really can't be on too long. So we decided not to apply term limit or recommend applying term limits there. But I think, this is why the council is here to discuss it. Thank you.
And Councilmember Hudas.
Thank you. I have many questions on this item. There are many changes being proposed, and there are also some new policies that appear to be coming from the policy committee. So first question for the town attorney, does the enabling resolution for the policy committee permit the proposal of a recommendation of new policies as compared to amending or rescinding existing policies?
They can recommend new policies, changes, amendments. They can do, the policy committee can do anything they want at this particular time.
So to follow up, then they don't need to follow the language of the enabling resolution that says that they shall amend or rescind policies.
No, they can look at amending, changing, and doing new policies within the framework that council gives us direction. As to this specific council policy that's in front of you, that was one of the direction that was given to look at all the commissions and committees and to bring back changes. It's actually not a new policy, but they could look at a brand new policy if they so choose to.
Okay, I would like to research that a bit. I believe term limits are a new policy as compared to an existing policy, since they don't exist. And since term limits at the council level were implemented through a ballot measure and a new ordinances. So
it had to be introduced at a ballot measure because the government code says that. There's no direction whatsoever in the government code regarding commissions and commissions, and it's up to the council to make those policies. This is simply a recommendation from the policy committee to the council.
And Councilmember Hughes, you're welcome to make research on your own, and then we just ask that those be brought to the town manager so that they can be incorporated into any future agenda items. So.
Okay. I had quite a few specific questions on this, some related to the appointment process, some related to attendance, and some related to term limits. Should I just work down the whole list?
Before you do so, let's see if, before you go down your list, if Councilmember Badami, if we can see if her list is shorter. Councilmember Badami?
I probably have a shorter list, but I don't want to interfere or duplicate the work that Councilmember Hudas has done. But I'll start with, I need to understand the rationale behind this, that the Council Policy Committee decided to do that. Is it simply because Town Council now has term limits? So is that the rationale for this? Through the chair, through the mayor, I'm sorry.
And Council Chair, well, you're wearing two roles today, Councilmember. So as the chair of the policy committee, and then I will again just bring it back to the town manager, town attorney, and Ms. Neese on past practices. But yes, Chair Risto.
I think part of the impetus behind this, and I'm totally open to a robust discussion, is that Mayor Sayak and I were just looking at one of our goals was more diversity and inclusion, and we were looking at how do we increase diversity on our commissions. And we've asked each commission to come back, to the council with suggestions. And one thought was that if we had term limits, it would allow more turnover. It would allow more citizens to participate in various commissions. So that was all that's behind it, was the opportunity for more people to serve on commissions and, maybe give people an opportunity that have been on one commission to take a couple of years off or apply to another commission. So that's all that's behind it. And, I don't know if it's the right decision or not, which is why we're having this discussion.
Okay, so I have one more question, and then I'll defer to others who probably have a lot more. But I'm looking at attachment number 1, and it talks about term limits. And item number 1 includes the word shall. So how do you control maintaining 2 incumbents on a commission? And what are the ramifications if this cannot be done? And for example, on the Building Board of Appeals, you've got 3 members. So a lot of times we don't even have applicants to fill the vacancies. So if I could understand why we would do this and how we would even implement it, I would appreciate some input from staff or whoever. Thank you.
So staff, I'm looking to our town attorney, town manager, and town clerk. Yes, Ms. Niesel.
I can start. So the way that it works right now is there are two positions that expire every year for those commissions that have 6 adult commissioners on it. And that includes Arts and Culture, Community Health and Senior Services, Complete Streets, Library, and Parks. So theoretically, if it works out and we don't have vacancies from resignations, there would always be at least 2 incumbents serving on a board. For the other ones that have uneven numbers of either terms or adults, that would be the Building Board of Appeals, the Finance Commission, General Plan Committee, Historic Preservation, and Personnel. Only 1 term expires per year. So we would only be replacing 1 person. So that would be leaving at least 2 people for like Board of Appeals that has 3. So for the Finance Commission, again, there are 5 adults on that. 1 would be expiring, 4 would be remaining, and so on with the others. So, you know, if we have no vacancies due to resignations, there would always be at least 1 or 2 incumbents on each one of the boards and commissions.
Thank you.
And Vice Mayor, I see your hand raised. Do you have a short list?
Well, to follow up on that, I still think you're going to end up with cases. I don't like the wording in number 1 either. I think you're going to have cases where an incumbent just didn't reapply, and some other incumbent is now at their term limit, and maybe you end up with only 1 incumbent now because you can't reappoint 1, and some other, you know, our commissions have been short, so there isn't always a full commission. I don't see number 1 as, I mean, how do you do that, right? Are you saying that we'll let somebody go beyond term limit in order to do number 1? Is that what that is saying? I don't understand that. And then my second question was, I asked it by email, but if it was answered, I'm sorry. I'm getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails about the BACMed Rule 6.5 coming, and it may have got lost, but are all the term limits on all of the commissions the same?
They are not. So Arts Commission, Community Health and Senior Services, Complete Streets, Library, Parks are 3 years. Board of Appeal is 4, I believe. Finance Commission, because it's a new commission, those are staggered right now and will play out as we go along. General Plan is 3, Historic is 4, Personnel is 4, and then Planning Commission is 4.
Okay, thank you. All right, and that's it for questions at this point.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hudis, let's go down your list of questions.
Sure. I share the same concern about item number 1, and I'm not sure how that would work, whether whether it would be possible in any way to do that, and whether in this wording a commission would fail the test of a valid commission if it didn't have incumbents on it. Let's say all the incumbents resigned. You know, what do you do? So I don't see that one as workable. I think the questions about it have been answered. I don't have any further questions about that. The next question I have relates to the term limits as well. And the question is, does this apply retrospectively? When does this apply? And it says beginning with terms that commence on or after January 22. So would that mean that incumbents who were on the commission at the time are permitted to stay longer?
And again, I'll let our town staff your understanding of that, but again, our understanding is that this is moving forward, similar to the term limits that were imposed on the town council.
That's correct. And really, it's a point in time. We have to start somewhere. And so our next adult recruitment will be in the fall. So if the term limits are in place, then they would start in 2022. So these rules would not apply in this fall recruitment. And I just want to add, if it's, we can discuss this later, but if the term incumbent is challenging for the council, I think what we're trying to say is that there should be at least 2 commissioners who remain sitting on the body while vacancies are happening. I know incumbent tends to imply that it's a vacancy that's going to be filled perhaps with an incumbent, but I think what we're really trying to say is that there should be sitting commissioners who remain on the body. I don't think it's likely that we would see full-scale resignation on any of our commissions. We have had trouble recruiting, but, and maybe it's that we need to lower the number down to 1. But the idea is that we really want to transition this over time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's definitely going to be a process, just like term limits at the council would be. Thank you.
And Ms. Neese, would you like to supplement that answer?
Yes, I would just like to clarify that for the fall recruitment, those appointees take their office January 1st, so it would apply to them. Anyone taking office January 1st, 2022 forward.
I stand corrected. Thank you.
And Vice Mayor, did you have a comment on this item?
I'd like to make a motion that we remove all term limits from this for the reasons I view this as a cop-out, so council members don't have to do the hard work. When somebody comes back and they're an incumbent, yeah, it's a little bit harder to not reappoint them. But if you think there's a more diverse candidate and you want to vote for a more diverse candidate, then do that and don't vote for the incumbent. I see this as, making it more difficult to recruit for our commissions. Or maybe not recruit, but fill our commissions. We have some that we've had at various times. We've had challenges not having full commissions and having to recruit again and again. And I think there's cases where having a couple commissioners that have been there a long time in certain commissions adds a lot of longevity to it. I don't see the need to match council term limits kind of thing. So I'll make the motion that we remove all term limits from this.
Okay, and I'll look for a second, and then I'll go back to any specific questions that council members would like to raise. I know Council Member Hudis, you indicated you had a list, but I'm looking for a second. And I see Council Member Badami's hand up. Okay, and before we do that, so we have a motion, we have a second, and before we actually take any further action, I would like to remind us that we haven't had public testimony yet. So let's table this, and I now, unless there's any more questions. Councilmember Hudis, question of staff?
No, I was going to second and make comments. I'll hold it.
Okay, and so now I open public comment. And for those in attendance that would like to comment on this particular item, number 12. I see no hands raised, so I'm closing public testimony. Bring this back to council. We do have a motion and a second. Councilmember Hudis, you had questions and you said you had more comments. So.
Yeah, at this point I have comments. I fully support the motion by the Vice Mayor. This is not clear that we are solving a problem that's an issue for the town. As compared to the council term limits, where a majority at one time or many council members had served more than 2 terms. When I looked at the existing boards, committees, and commissions, only 8 out of 66 or 12%, have served more than 2 terms. Council term limits will tend to inhibit the reappointment of incumbents anyway, now that we have council term limits. We also have a long tradition of some of our most effective volunteers serving the town for multiple terms. Charles Erickson, Tom O'Donnell, Glenn Pacheco, Bob Cowan, and several others who are serving currently. And we really only have a handful of current commissioners, but it's only a handful. And fundamentally, these volunteers are different from elected positions. And so I would urge the rest of the council to support the motion that's been made.
Councilmember Badami, and then Councilmember Risto.
So I would just like to reinforce the comments just made by Councilmember Hudis. In particular, the esteemed Tom O'Donnell came to mind. I mean, he led the Planning Commission for several hearings where you even had incumbents sitting on there that learned from him up until the very end. We could have used him again, but he chose not to reapply. With that, we have to remember that commissioners are advisors. They are not policymakers. So it's kind of apples to oranges to say, well, council has term limits, so let's make the commissioners be term limits. No, it's completely different. And when you have an advisor, and anybody can have advisors for their personal wealth, financial well-being, you're going to look typically for somebody that's got knowledge and experience and can add to the conversation, that can make good decisions for the benefit of the town.
Thank you. And Councilmember Risto.
Thank you. I think this is a good discussion. I think we were looking at it through a variety of lenses. One of the priorities that the council set was to increase diversity and inclusivity. I know as somebody that since probably 2010 has actively worked through the community and tried to get people to apply to commissions, often the first question they'll ask is there an opening? And a lot of people will not apply to a commission if they know that it's the incumbents re-upping. And maybe that's okay, but it might have been their year. And, you know, it's hard to know. I totally appreciate the service that we get from our commissioners. And, you know, I would not be willing to say that somebody who served on a commission for 8 years has served too long. It was just sort of to open up the conversation, because I think there are people who would apply to a commission if they thought they had a better opportunity to get on there. And when we're looking at trying to bring new people to be involved in the town, this was one possibility. So I'm not opposed to anybody being on a commission for a long time, and I'm not looking to, you know, disrespect anyone's long service. I've certainly served on commissions for consecutive periods. And so, you know, I think if the council, you know, as we have this discussion, if this doesn't look like a way to increase diversity on our commissions, we'll look for other ways. And maybe we just need to up our recruitment.
And I also will not be supporting the motion for the reasons that Councilmember Risto also shared. Similar to the general population vote that just occurred, I don't think that it was meant to disrespect any of our council members, former and current, that were serving beyond 2 terms, but just an opportunity to recognize that there are many others in the community that would like to serve their town. And it is a daunting process, that people feel that an incumbent, right or wrong, always has that advantage, and that inhibits and prohibits people from applying. So with that said, I will call the motion. Councilmember Risto?
No.
Councilmember Badami?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Rennie?
Aye.
Councilmember Hudis?
Aye.
And I vote no, so the motion passes 3-2 with Councilmember Risto and Sayok dissenting. And now we move to agenda item number 11. Oh wait, I'm sorry.
There's more to the policy. There were other recommended changes in terms of the purpose.
Oh, you're
um,
correct.
some
Thank
other
you for pointing that
sections.
out.
So if there's, and certainly some of these might also warrant discussion by council.
Absolutely. Thank you for reminding me that, Town Manager. And so I go back to the council. Are there any questions on other items? Councilmember Hudas.
First, I wanted to understand what we're trying to accomplish by limiting the public from being able to pull consent items. It seems that that aids in transparency and participation, and that a move away from that is a move
The
away
next
from
That's
that.
actually, Councilmember Hudas, that's agenda item number 11.
I'm sorry, I'm back on 11.
Yes, so we're still on 12 because there were
Yeah.
other items on agenda item 12.
I did have some other items on 12. This relates to the paragraph on, let's see, page 5, I believe, of the policy, which states that to ensure the interview process is fair and equitable, each applicant will be asked the same core questions provided to the council by the town clerk. So my first question about that is for staff. Do other towns or cities do this? Have the town clerk draft questions that are asked of applicants?
Yes, and in some cities, the town department that is the liaison would actually do the drafting of the questions, with the concept being that it's a level playing field, at least in terms of those core questions. And then as the interview progresses, there'd be the opportunity to explore other areas of interest.
So in what way is the town clerk qualified to provide questions that council members must ask? That's the way it's worded.
Well, again, we're all one team. And so the department that has purview over the commission, for example, the CDD has purview over the planning commission. They would identify questions and then provide those to the town clerk. It's just more orderly if the council knows that you're getting it from your clerk as opposed to individual staff departments. So we would have our own internal process to vet questions and then bring them forward to the town clerk, who, as your clerk, would then provide them. And I'm sorry, Shelley, you probably have some insight given your experience with other clerks as to how this might work as well. Sorry.
No, that's no problem. How you explained it is exactly how it works, because I am the liaison between council and the departments for this type of thing. That's why they would be coming from me. I would be working with the department heads to get the questions for you, and then I would be providing them to you.
But I understand the commissions are not appointed by the departments. They're appointed by elected representatives of the residents of Los Gatos. And so while it might be helpful to understand topics and subjects, I don't understand how the town clerk represents the residents of Los Gatos.
And if I could answer that, I believe what I'm hearing and what I've seen occurring not only within our own town as well as in other municipalities is that Ms. Neese would be working with all the appropriate departments and working with the council to ensure that the questions that we would like asked are incorporated into the interview process, so that, again, it's asked equitably and that there isn't a sense of familiarity with one person versus another. I think that's the underlying goal. The specifics of what that question is or who it originated from, I think, is not the primary focus, but the intent is to have it delivered in an equitable fashion. And it is Mrs. Neese's job to ensure that these commission interviews are done in a fair manner.
Okay, then I would follow up with a motion if I may.
Okay,
Um,
and before we do so, let's start with question. No one make a motion because Councilmember Hughes. Oh, sorry about that. So before I allow Mr. Hughes to do the motion, are there questions? And then I'll allow the motion. Councilmember Risto.
I guess I do have a question. I don't want to get too wordy in this resolution, but it's not clear from the wording of that the clerk will submit the question how the process would go. And, you know, in terms of how would council have input or which department head. So would it be possible to expand the wording on here or set up a process whereby the questions would be put together and how that would be overseen? Because, you know, I know that the reason for doing this is I've sat in on interviews, I've watched the interviews for the past 15 years, and a lot of times, depending on the council people, it just gets to be, gee, I see you have a Berkeley hat on, you're a Bear fan. You know, I mean, the questions aren't equal. It's not always handled the same way. And so I like the uniformity. I think that's what we were striving for, but I'm not sure if the wording in this resolution captures how that process would work.
And so since that was a question, yes, Ms. Neese?
We can definitely expand on that paragraph to add the process in there, so it's clear.
Okay, and then council member, well, real quick, Vice Mayor, did you have a question before we go to a motion?
It's not really a question. It was a suggestion on how we might change the wording.
Okay, so why don't we go to Councilmember Hughes for a motion first, and then if, depending on the motion, if you'd like to make a friendly amendment, but Councilmember Hughes.
Thank you. So I'm going to attempt to add some of that wording. And so I agree that it would be helpful to have questions coming from experts in the town to the council that the council could use. So I would do two things to the wording as it's written. I would add the words, notwithstanding, no council member shall be prevented from asking appropriate questions of applicants. And I would strike the words in parens, not of a personal nature unless it pertains to experience, because it may come to the attention of a council member that there is an ethical or an honesty issue or a criminal background that could be relevant to appointing someone to a commission other than personal nature. So I would suggest striking that language as well. So two things that I would do.
And Councilmember Badami, you have your hand raised. Is that a second?
That's a second.
Okay. And so Councilmember Rennie, I know that you were looking at language, not to pick on you, but do you have any comments?
I was going to suggest, I mean, the changes Councilmember Hughes mentioned are okay. Maybe we might consider, you know, it says provided by the council by the clerk. Really what I think it is we want to ask the same core questions, and we want the clerk's help to get us started, but the council members could agree to change the questions if they think appropriate, as long as they ask the same questions for all of them. And this wording doesn't really say, it sounds like we have to use what the clerk has given us. Councilmember Hughes does sound like a little bit like he could throw in questions, different questions for different ones, which is not really what's intended. What I think we want to be able to do is modify the clerk's questions as long as we ask them uniformly. I'll see what Councilmember Risto has a comment.
Real quick, before that, I want to give the motion of the maker of the motion, Councilmember Hudis, your interpretation and whether you'd like to keep your motion as is.
Sure, I'd be willing to incorporate language to the first part of what the Vice Mayor suggested, which is that it seemed as though the council could modify the questions that are provided by the town clerk. However, I don't think it's a good idea to require uniformity. We do that on the application, but the interview process is an opportunity to find out. For instance, if you have a long-standing planning commissioner, you don't need to ask the same question about, do you understand what land use is? It's something fundamental. On the other hand, you might have someone applying for planning commissioner who thinks that any kind of strategic planning is in the realm of the planning commission. So you might want to ask, do you understand what land use planning is, or give an example of land use planning? So I think it actually aids in the creation of high quality commissions to be able to tailor the questions. And I think we accomplish the uniformity through the application process, and that's a good starting point. So I'd be a little bit uncomfortable with that part, but I would be willing to accept the first part that was suggested.
Okay, and the seconder of the motion.
I'll go along with that.
Okay, and then Councilmember Risto.
Two things. One, I have a question for Ms. Neese. I mean, talking about how other cities do it, are there typically different questions for incumbents or experienced people than new applicants?
That I'm not familiar with. I did not ask that question. Different cities do it different ways. So they might have a committee like we do for the Youth Commission, as opposed to the full council interviewing all of the applicants. So each jurisdiction handles it a little bit differently. Okay.
And then in terms of how, if I can continue, in terms of how the questions could be created, I don't know if we're going to memorialize that, but I think I don't want to create a lot of work for staff, but if there could be some planning in advance or back and forth so the council can see what the questions are or give input. But I think it's important to have the commission, the actual commission, have input on what the questions are, because a lot of times maybe the commission knows more about what they're looking for than the council does. I'm not sure. I don't want to create like a whole committee to create questions, but I do think uniformity of question asking is important, because I think some applicants in the past have gotten more robust questions than others. And, I think one of the questions that's almost always asked is, what more would you like us to know about you? When we get to, we've seen their applications, maybe we need to make the application more robust so that we're getting those basic questions out of the way, so we don't have to ask any basic questions and we're doing follow-on to learn more about their thought process.
So Mayor, if I would make, so just as a reminder, the council did direct that all of the boards and commissions review their applications and provide input on how they would like them modified. And so they are still working on that. So that would go back to the policy committee, I believe, for them to review the different enabling resolutions before we brought it forward to council, if we need to, for the applications. As far as the questions go, I can work with the directors for the questions ahead of time, provide them to council before the interview date so they can look at the interviews, at the interview questions, and provide their input on that. So you're not having to make decisions right before you start your interviews. So that all of that is done ahead of time, and we can put that in the policy also. Those are just some suggestions.
You, Vice Mayor Rennie?
I wanted to comment that I agree that there should be some core questions, but you can't do the same question of each member, as Mr. Hudis said, Councilmember Hudis said, there, you know, a experienced person is going to be able to answer the question and know what you're asking. Somebody that's brand new might still be qualified, but don't know how to answer the question. And you need to follow up often with other kinds of questions. And that all of a sudden sounds like they're getting more robust questioning. Well, I don't think that's the case. It's digging in and trying to understand, you know, more about them. It's much easier to know about somebody who's already been on the commissions. And of course, we ask all the core questions, but often the new people need to be asked more digging questions, I think. And so I don't want it to. I think I'm agreeing with Councilmember Hudis. It can't be too uniform. So that's my comment.
And I'm going to ask Ms. Neese to respond to that. One of the things, and I don't mean to complicate it as well, but just a reminder to our council members, we often don't have time for robust, we tend to just give each council member one question. And so that's also something that is worth considering. If you have that one question, are you going to ask about someone's baseball hat, for example? I know that was a flippant example, but it's been done. And so Ms. Neese.
So in response to Vice Mayor, I would just say, and to Councilmember Hudis, we can have two different sets of questions, one for incumbents and one for, you know, brand new people. I mean, so we can address it that way.
Councilmember Hudis.
Yeah, so I'd like my motion to stand and get a vote. I understand the additional comments that have been made, and I think they can be handled by the town clerk and the town manager ably in preparing these core questions and forwarding them to the council. I don't think we need a more complex process. You know, one set for incumbents, one set for non-incumbents. It strikes me as complex. You have degree of incumbency. You have, you know, some commissions, such as the Finance Commission, where there are certain criteria that are laid out, and you may need to ask one particular applicant about the degree to which they meet those criteria. So I think the flexibility exists as it is in the redraft and the motion. So I would suggest you know, moving on with this, and then if we need to do more, then to do more. But I think that it's pretty straightforward.
Okay, so if I could clarify on staff's behalf, the original motion was to remove the words notwithstanding that the council can't provide information to the town clerk. And that the last comment that's in parentheses, not of a personal nature, we strike that. Yes, Councilmember Hudis?
Yeah, just to clarify, the first part is notwithstanding, no council member shall be prevented from asking appropriate questions of applicants.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I'm going to look to staff to make sure we captured that. Okay, and the seconder of the motion?
I second Stan's.
Okay, and so I'll call the question. Councilmember Hudis?
Aye.
Councilmember Risto?
Aye.
Councilmember Badami?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Rennie?
Aye.
I also vote aye, and this motion passes unanimously. And I am looking, since we were parsing this policy separately, are the rest of the proposed modifications that is outlined in our staff report, are there any other changes? If not, can I have a motion to those additions? Vice Mayor Rennie.
I'll make a motion that we keep the other changes that are in there. So that excludes any of the term limits to be removed and the changes per Councilmember Hudis's motion.
Okay, and Councilmember Badami?
Second.
And any comments or questions to that motion? Seeing none, Vice Mayor Rennie,
Aye.
Councilmember Risto,
Aye.
Councilmember Hudis,
Aye.
Councilmember Badami,
Aye.
and I also vote aye, and that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. So now we move to agenda item number 11. And if Ms. Neese, if you could also provide that staff report. So.
Thank you. The policy committee discussed the proposed modifications to the agenda format and rules at their April meeting. The modifications that are proposed are to increase the efficiency of meetings. The modifications proposed are adding a public comment portion for the consent calendar before council votes on it, rather than asking the public to remove an item or pull an item from the consent calendar for discussion. Another one is if the member of the public speaks to the wrong item, the time used would be deducted from the speaker's time on the correct item, and adding guidelines for continuing remote participation for council, commissioners, and the public. This concludes my staff report.
Thank you, Ms. Neese. And so I look to council for questions. Vice Mayor Rennie.
Just a question to remind me, are the public able to comment on items on the consent calendar that are not polled? In all my other boards and commissions, we don't allow members of the public to poll items, but they can comment on them, and that may be what really is needed. I mean, so I'll just stop with that question.
Okay, and so Ms. Neese.
So the way ours is currently, no, the public cannot just comment on an item. They have to pull it for a discussion. And checking with other jurisdictions in Santa Clara County, the majority of them provide a public comment portion on the consent calendar, and the public does not have an opportunity to pull an item. But if an item is commented on by the public, any council member could then pull that item for further discussion.
And is that this changes that will be here? If we go with these changes to not allow the public to pull an item, will we then add in the ability for them to comment? I don't think I saw that in here.
Yes, that is what the proposal is.
Okay.
And just to clarify, we would have to do that to comply with the Brown Act.
And Councilmember Hudis.
So I apologize for asking at the wrong time, but it's the same question. I'm interested in understanding the rationale for excluding the public from being able to ask for an item to be individually discussed and voted upon. In support of full transparency in government, I think that is a feature for our interaction with our residents. And so I'm interested in whether council member, mayor, or staff, what is the advantage in doing this, and does it lead to at least equivalent transparency and engagement with our public?
Okay. And I see Councilmember Risto, who is also chair of the Policy Commission. I'll call on you.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I was looking at this, we were looking at this through a variety of lenses, but because the public can then, whether they wanted an item pulled or not, have the ability to weigh in or talk about consent items. Sometimes there's members of the public who pull an item who just want to say that they're in favor of it. We've had that happen before. We've had people want to pull 3 items that all related, and they could speak on all of them at once. In some ways, it gives the public just as much, if not more, ability to speak on the items, because we would have public input on the entire consent calendar, and the public can weigh in on any and all of those items. And I would say that I can understand, I received some letters where people were concerned that this would block out the public from pulling an item from the consent calendar. My thought is that if somebody wants an item pulled from the consent calendar and they're speaking at not verbal communications, but they're speaking on the consent calendar, they should be able to make a compelling case that would cause one of the 5 council members to pull the item from the consent calendar. If in that 3 minutes they can't make that case, I'm not sure that if they ask to have the item pulled, there would be a different outcome. So, you know, I don't know which is better, but it seemed to me that this would allow the public to weigh in on any item on the consent calendar all at once. And we could just have that one hearing, and then the council members could decide if, in addition, they wanted to pull an item, if that makes sense.
And Councilmember Badami?
I'll just be commenting on that, and I'll take tonight for an example. We had 9 items on the consent calendar, and I don't believe we had anybody from the public that commented on any of those 9 items, nor did anyone from the public want to pull an item. In fact, the only one that pulled an item is Councilmember Hudis. So I would think it's not typical, and I have concerns about eliminating the public process, because the way I read the staff report, the main reason for doing this is to improve efficiency, but at what cost? It makes the council appear over controlling, and we're given control without accountability and transparency at the cost of the public's faith and trust in us and our democratic process.
Thank you. And I'll weigh in as well. Again, what we've seen in other municipalities as well as other organizations, by allowing people to comment on the consent agenda beforehand, before it's voted on, or if they are asking one of the board members to remove it and hear it for a hearing, it actually gives them an opportunity to speak. We've had some hearings that have gone late, and those that have pulled agenda items have left, and so they haven't even had the opportunity to comment. And so again, looking at how to allow those comments to be heard without necessarily having to have people sit in through a whole hearing and then hear the comments that they initially wanted to provide. Vice Mayor Rennie?
I just wanted to ask staff to confirm that what Councilmember Risto said that about our process, that so we would be changing the process. So now the public gets to comment on the consent items, which they currently are not able to do unless they actually pull something. So we would have this comment period, and then the next thing is council members would then be able to pull an item if they heard something from the public that told them, yeah, we should have more discussion on an item on the consent. Is that correct? That's what our process would be?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And my comment would be, it seems to me that actually gives the public more opportunity to comment on items and give us their input, because some people are going to be hesitant to pull an item just to make a comment, right? And we don't really give them an opportunity to do that. So it sounds like a better process to me. And then the council is actually making the decision on whether they want to make further discussion on it or not.
Councilmember Hudis?
Yeah, just a clarification. So if a member of the public, let's say, comments on the budget which is a consent item, and then a council member decides to pull that item, would that same member of the public be afforded the opportunity to speak about the budget a second time?
And so I look to staff.
Yes, they would be able to speak on that item again when it comes up for public hearing.
And Councilmember Badami?
I have a question for staff. And how common is this in comparison to other jurisdictions?
This process is what the majority of other jurisdictions in Santa Clara County follow. The one that is being proposed.
But the way we're currently doing it is not out of the norm either. There are some that require it. I believe Campbell allows it, but that's, it's really up to council how they believe is the best effective way. And I've heard both sides of the coin. And I think the one that brought this to the attention was exactly what the mayor said, that there's been some times lately when the item's been pulled from the consent, and now it's not heard till 11:30, and that person that pulled it is not even there. And this would give them the opportunity to be able to speak at 7. And jurisdictions where I've seen it done the way that's proposed, I find it's rare that if someone doesn't get up and wants something pulled, it's very rare there's not a council member that won't pull it for a discussion.
Councilmember Risto?
Yes, thank you. I do think that, as council people, we've taken an oath and we are here to represent the public. And so I would like to think that if a member of the public got up and asked for an item to be pulled or gave a compelling reason, that we would be receptive to that. In looking at other jurisdictions and other board groups that we all sit on, this is pretty common to have comments just on the consent calendar as a chunk, and then the council people or the board members can pull consent items. And I think I'm not seeing it as a restriction of the public input. I mean, one thing that was surprising to me is the city of Palo Alto, one council person can't even pull a consent item. You need 3 council people to pull a consent item. So, I think it's across the spectrum. I don't think we're doing anything very restrictive or unusual.
Vice Mayor Rennie?
Usually the process I see other places is the board members, commission members decide to pull items, and then the items that are left on consent, the public comments on. If you let them comment first and then you pull it, you might end up with an item that a lot of people get to talk about twice, and that might be inefficient to your meeting if you're trying to create a more efficient meeting. I don't think I've ever seen the case, but maybe it would be allowed, where council members decide what they want pulled, then you allow the public to comment, and then you give council a chance to pull again. I've never seen that, but maybe that's possible. So maybe, I think we're talking about the usual process, but there isn't usually a chance to pull something after the public speaks. What exactly are we proposing?
And actually, I'm going to ask Ms. Neese, Ms. Pravetti, or Mr. Schultz. I hadn't thought of that wrinkle, Vice Mayor Rennie, but that doesn't mean our staff didn't.
I did not. Manager Pravetti, did you think of that one, or Mr. Schultz?
I think we were thinking, at least at the policy committee discussion, that public comment would happen first, and then council members would make the decision, either due to public testimony or even their own thoughts, whether or not to pull a particular item. So that way, and, I think in terms of the process, allowing people to speak on the item once it's pulled, I think that's part of being in this business, is that if we have to hear it a second time, that's part of our work. So I think that was the intent, is that we wouldn't be pulling items and then having public comment and then doing nothing with those comments. So I think we were looking at a little bit more of an inclusive type approach, at least at the moment that the committee made its recommendation to all of you.
And Mr. Schultz, your mic is off. Did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, just to reiterate, the process would be is there would be a public comment period on the consent items. People can get up and speak on the consent items, whether they're for, against, or whether they're against want it pulled, or they want it for and they want it pulled. Council then, when they close the public hearing on consent, you would say, is there any items that council wants to pull? If they're pulled, then they're heard as a normal business item with public comment, not only by that person who, if there was one person that got up and spoke that they wanted it pulled, usually it's the same speech and they probably don't have as much to say, but they'd still be entitled to the 3 minutes. Anybody else could then get up, just if it's pulled now, and speak on that item.
And since I see no questions immediately, I'm going to go to our public and allow public testimony. And so if any member of our public would like to speak on item number 11, please raise your hand. I see no hands raised, so I close public testimony and I bring this back to council for more questions, comments, and or a motion. Okay,
And I would just interject to say it's not the only change. Again, you know, the motion's not concerning just the consent item. There's other changes also.
Correct. Thank you for pointing that out. Thank you again for pointing that out. And if you look at our staff report, that's on page 1 and 2, it lists the various changes. Councilmember Risto?
Yes, I would like to ask you, Mayor, I mean, similar to the last item, do we want to break this up into pieces to make a motion?
You're welcome to do so if you feel like you want to break it up and not to cover the entire.
Okay, I think before we move on to the other items, I would like to move to approve the changes to public testimony at the consent calendar, change as written, where the public would be able, any member of the public would be able to speak on the consent calendar as a unit on any and all items on the consent calendar. And after that public input is closed, then council members would decide if for their own reasons or those expressed by the public to pull an item on the consent calendar. Each item would be heard as regular business, and any member of the public who spoke on the consent calendar would also have the opportunity to speak on any of the individual items.
I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? I will second the motion for the reasons already stated. And just again, the intent behind this is to allow more public testimony and public comment to items on the consent agenda. We have several public members who attend not knowing the nuances, which is why we have to further clarify the meaning of pulling consent. I think that has confused a couple of our public. And so the idea is to give them the opportunity to make a comment without hesitating to pull an item and then waiting all night for it. So I'll second the motion. Any questions and or comments to that motion? Yes, Councilmember Hudas?
Yeah, I won't be supporting the motion. I understand there's some advantages of getting public comment on consent. The number of consent items is substantial these days. And I think that taking comments on various items in sort of random order that they come up with in the public doesn't lead to a good rational consideration of the issue. And I think that as some other municipalities do, we allow the public to engage more directly in the workings of government by not only making an argument about an item, but also having the ability to pull it to have a clear, transparent vote. And that sometimes is what the issue is about. You know, seeing each member of the council take a vote on an item rather than it just being bundled and hidden with a whole list of other things is sometimes an important feature that the public is able to do here in Los Gatos that I think contributes to, frankly, to democracy and to the engagement of our public. And I would just add that should the motion pass, I would also say to the public that if you ever want an item pulled, please let me know and I will pull it for any reason that you say, because I think it's important if that's the way this turns out, that the public be able to engage directly. So I would invite that. Thank you.
Councilmember Risto.
I have a question for staff. When we vote on the consent calendar, certainly I've seen abstentions. Have council members voted no on specific items without pulling it? Because I think I've seen that before.
Yes.
Okay, so I would then say that the public should understand that when the town council votes on the consent calendar, and if it passes unanimously, that is actually, and we each cast an individual vote, we are essentially casting 5 votes for each item. And we always have the possibility to abstain or vote no. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Badami.
I also won't be supporting the motion, and along with the comments provided by Councilmember Hudis, the rationale is not compelling enough to me to warrant change. And I would have also liked to have seen a comparison study of the surrounding municipalities. But again, at this point, I just cannot support the motion.
Vice Mayor Rennie.
I will support the motion, actually based on what Councilmember Hudis said. If by supporting the motion, we now allow people to comment on all the items that they weren't easily able to do before. So we're gaining that. And then if somebody wants it pulled, Mr. Hudis promises to pull it for them. So we get the best of all worlds by going with this motion. So I'll be supporting it.
Any further comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Vice Mayor Rennie.
Aye.
Councilmember Risto.
Aye.
Councilmember Hudis.
No.
Councilmember Badami.
No.
I vote aye. The motion passes 3-2 with Council Members Badami and Hudis dissenting. And there are 6 other recommended changes. And so I go back to the council for any comment and or motion on those items that are contained in page 2 of our staff report. Councilmember Badami.
I'll go ahead and try a motion, and that I move to adopt the proposed modifications to the agenda format and rules policy as recommended by the Council Policy Committee, with the exception of item number D, which has previously been voted on.
Okay, and we have a motion on the floor, and Vice Mayor Rennie, you put your hand down.
I'll second it. That's fine.
Okay.
I was going to make a comment. Is now appropriate time?
Yes, as a seconder.
I wanted to comment on the attendance at the meetings portion of it. I know that's difficult to come up with a perfect solution. I think we do want to kind of loosen up attendance rules, and this does move in that direction. I'm not sure if it's a perfect solution, but I would say we try this out, both for council. It's going to be for council and for commissions. So I'm going to support the language that's in there and see how that works out.
Councilmember Hudis.
I had a couple of questions, I think, for the town attorney. So since attendance at meetings seems to be applying to both town council and boards, commissions, and committees, what are the remedies, particularly should a council member make more than 2 remote meetings?
So
what are the consequences? How do you
the consequences?
Enforce this?
Yeah. So the consequences from council's end could be a few different that are really handled under our code of conduct. You could do a reprimand. You could do a taking away of special privileges he talks about, which is taking away the commissions or committees that you sit on. Council could bring that forward. or it could, one's a warning and one is really a formal reprimand. So those are the avenues that council could take if someone was blatantly not following the remote and continue to. Or, we could change the policy to even put in additional language that just simply would not allow you to even remotely call in after you've already reached your limit. But that currently isn't in there of what the ramifications of doing something like that would be, and staff wouldn't undertake that on their own. So if someone violated the policy, we would bring it back to council to see what they would want to do under a code of conduct policy.
So as a follow-up, is it clear enough to not have consequences outlined in this?
Well, there are. It's just it's in a different policy. The procedure that you'd undertake if a council member violates the policy. We could certainly clean it up to make reference to the code of conduct, and if a member does, that's the repercussion. But we couldn't we couldn't add anything more than that, or instructing staff to simply not allow them to remotely participate. So it's up to council if they need further language of the repercussions.
Okay, I had another question as well in that same section. The way I'm reading it, it says requests by council members to attend a council meeting via remote appearance are allowed on a limited basis and with no more than 2 participations in a row. And then the following sentence says remote attendance shall be permitted for a medical, family, or work event requiring their absence. So is that an and, meaning that, let's say a council member had surgery and had to miss 3 or 4 in-person meetings, but could participate remotely? Do those things go together, or are they separate?
I guess I'll start. My understanding is they go together. You're only allowed to miss 2 remote meetings, and the reason why you could miss them is for that medical, family, or other emergency. It's not to just be able to go to 2 remote meetings because you don't want to be at a meeting and just want to be home, and then come to an in-person meeting, then go to 2 remotes, and then go to in-person.
Well, so the case where you had surgery and had to miss 3 meetings, that comes back to these consequences, but does that automatically lead to a code of conduct violation?
It would automatically lead to a discussion of that, and maybe it's an exception is granted for that situation by the committee and the council.
And I would
But again, it's your policy. If there's language you want to stick in there to make it different than what I understood it to be, certainly then that should be clarified by the policy committee and council.
Right.
And Ms. Pavetti, would you like to speak?
I'm sorry. I just wanted to add that, we have such a dedicated council over these many years. We've had people who unfortunately were actually quite ill and still participated remotely, or did have surgery and participated remotely. So I think, I think for Los Gatos, we've had a pretty high level of engagement on the part of council members. And I think given our meeting schedule, since we meet the first and third Tuesday of the month, we typically have a pretty good break, between that third Tuesday and again, the next first Tuesday. So hopefully that would give a council member time to recover should additional time be needed. So I think this was just trying to set an expectation of in-person participation, especially after working remotely now for so many months. Thank you.
I understand, but it does, you know, it seems as though the remote is limited to 2 consecutive, and I can think of some circumstances where that would be a problem, and I don't think we would want to remove a council member over something like that. If it were a problem and we were having a problem with this, maybe, but for that reason, I think that is just too stringent.
And any further comments, Councilmember Hudis?
No.
Councilmember Risto?
Okay, a couple of things. I mean, relating to the first one, my concern would be if we're allowing remote, I think the clarification for me is, if we're allowing remote participation and we end up not having a quorum, we can't have a meeting because the quorum is required to be in one physical space. So it now sounds like, as I'm reading through it again, the intention is more that because we have the capability for people to participate remotely, and if there is a medical emergency or something, they can still participate. Question for staff, we can't remove a council person. We could remove a commissioner for not showing up. And of course, that's our discretion. And there have been commissioners bounced off commissions for missing too many meetings, but we are elected officials. Only the people can remove one of us. Is that correct?
That is correct, although there is a government code section that states if you miss all meetings or all, I believe it's all general meetings consecutively for a 60-day period, then by code, your position is vacated. So it would be a 60-day period, but that has nothing to do with council being able to remove him. So your first statement is correct, but there is a code section that says if you miss 60 days worth of consecutive meetings, you are automatically vacate your position.
Okay. And then I just wanted to make comments on the rest of the items we were talking about, because, I know that as a council, we do have a policy, but it hasn't been memorialized that when we're participating on Zoom, our camera is on at all times. And I know that we observe that. I know not all of our commissioners do, so this will apply to all commissions. And we have no control over it, but I wish it applied to some of the external boards I sit on, because it's kind of strange to just stare at a blank screen. You wonder if the person's actually there. And then the third item, which I think was really important to me while I was campaigning, and I know has become more important to all of us, is to continue the public participation with Zoom even after we come out of the pandemic. We don't know if that's going to be required by state law or not, but I really appreciate that we are moving forward and looking at that. I think it allows more people to participate. I think it's more inclusive. Parents don't have to worry about getting a babysitter. Somebody who is not feeling well doesn't have to pull themselves into council chambers or miss the meeting. Somebody who has mobility issues can make a choice if they want to get into council chambers or call from home. So I'm really happy to have that part in there. Thank you.
And I'll make a couple clarifications as to that bill pending in Sacramento. It looks like it's only going to apply to cities of over 250,000, so it won't apply for us. But in fact, when we come out of and there are no more emergency orders, one thing you will have to remember about remote participation is you will have to provide us with that information 72 hours before the meeting, and you must allow the public to attend the meeting wherever you're having it from. And that would mean that the public could come into your home and attend the meeting at your home if you're going to use that as your location. Right now, we've been trying very hard on the Brown Act committee that I serve on to get that language changed, but we are getting quite a bit of opposition. So that's something that we'll have to take into consideration as we move forward and we come out of the emergency declaration, to go back to having to provide that address and provide public at the location that you're at.
Mr. Schultz, Councilmember Hudis.
Yeah, I wanted to just say I support the comments of Councilmember Risto with regard to making meetings available and the camera. I think those are really good improvements to our policy and will again tend to put forward the purpose of democracy. And so that part of it I am very supportive of. I wonder if the town attorney, when we draft this, do we have to codify Zoom as the product, or can we use a more generic term for a video conference?
Yeah, you're right. We should use a more generic term than Zoom, because who knows where we'll be.
Okay. So I just wanted to come back to the concern that I have. I understand we're trying to make this more accessible, easier to do, and as we transition to be able to do Zoom and in-person meetings. But I actually think the combination of the no more than 2 in a row and the second sentence that it says shall be permitted for medical, family, or work, eliminating similar is making it more stringent on council members, and could lead to some council members, again, I'm not talking about this council, but sometime in the future, taking action against another council member who has been ill and is still able to participate remotely, is not doing remote participation out of convenience, but is doing it out of necessity. And the combination of those two, I think, is actually more stringent than the existing language that states that telephone attendance shall be permitted in the event of extraordinary events. And now we're saying that it's permitted, but only 2 consecutively. And I think that is, I think that is being too restrictive. So just wanted to make that point.
Any further comments? Councilmember Risto?
I think Councilmember Hudes raises some good comments. I mean, I think it's really hard to anticipate what will happen in the future. And when we put restrictions like numbers in there, that can create some problems. So, you know, I'm trying to remember what we were trying to accomplish by expanding the remote. I mean, the sentence in the past, it had been examined for absence policies. Council members, a couple of resolutions ago, used to be able to participate remotely for a variety of reasons, and it became more restrictive. It was for medical reasons, it was out of town. And so what I'm trying to figure out, I didn't think our intention was to make that even more restrictive by saying up to 2 meetings remotely in a row. And so, Mayor, if you can help me remember, I thought we were opening it up more. Or Ms. Neese, you probably can clarify that for me, because it was not my intention to make it more restrictive.
Right, Ms. Neese, why don't you go first, and then I could share along based on my own observations from Policy Committee. Ms. Neese?
So what I recall is we chose the 2 because it wasn't just for council. This is for all of the boards and commissions, so for all commissioners. And we did have, you know, instances where some commissioners were participating remotely every month or every meeting. So when we had the discussion, my recollection is that we settled on 2 because the committee thought that was a fair number. But this policy can always be changed at any time if we find the 2 is restrictive, and there needs to be cases. I mean, it's not like this is set in stone for forever going forward.
And that was my recollection as well. We moved away from a climate where council members were absolutely, actually, I'll speak for myself. Well, I don't want to speak for you, Vice Mayor Rennie, but we were not encouraged to miss any single meeting. And we did have several members that attended that really shouldn't have, due to a variety of reasons. And I think what we want to do is, again, using the code of conduct, if it turns out that there is a reasonable, justifiable reason for 2 remote meetings in a row, the code of conduct follows a process that allows that conversation to happen. And I don't want people to think that we're automatically assuming the worst and why someone's not in attendance. But Ms. Pravetti, and then I'll go to Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think the change to add 2 consecutive actually provides more flexibility, because that means that remote participation could happen throughout the entire year. It's just that the restriction would be 2 consecutive meetings. So there would still be the expectation that attendance would occur, but it's not any 2 meetings, it's just the 2 consecutive meetings. Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
And I was going to add that I don't think 2 consecutive meetings is that constraining. A lot of if you're worried about commissions, a lot of the commissions meet once a month or even less, once every other month. So that, the concern would be if somebody, had a surgery and it's a back surgery and they're in bed for, a long time, 2 meetings might not be enough for them, and maybe we address that specially. But even with commissions, 2 meetings is probably going to be 2 months or more, with the exception of Planning Commission, which meets twice a month. And Planning Commission is probably of the importance that you really don't want them missing more than 2 in a row anyway. And because there's going to have to be quorum planning going on by the chair of the commission or staff, we need to limit it somewhat also with the 2. So I think it's not too bad going with the two limit.
I would.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Schultz, did you want
No,
to add
but
something?
just with that comment, I would suggest we do put in the language though that it's a regular meeting and not all meetings, because you could have a special meeting and a council meeting in the same week or 2, or even a special meeting for one of our commissions. So I think our intent was regular council meetings and regular commission board meetings.
And Councilmember Hudis?
Yeah, I just wanted to understand. So is this anticipating that remote participation will still ensure a quorum?
I'm going to let Mr. Schultz answer that.
So unless new legislation comes about, a quorum, a majority after we come out of all the emergency orders, a majority will have to be in town hall. So 3 would not be able to participate remotely. Under any circumstances, we wouldn't have a quorum and not be able to have that meeting.
Okay, can I have a motion?
There is a motion on the floor already.
I made the motion.
I'm sorry.
and Councilmember Rennie seconded it.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion. Thank you for reminding me. So I'm going to call the question. Councilmember Hudis?
No.
Vice Mayor Rennie?
Aye.
Councilmember Risto?
Aye.
Councilmember Badami?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. This motion passes 4-1 with Councilmember Hudis dissenting.
And Mayor, if I
Yes.
may, the minor clarifications such as the town attorney's clarification for regular council and commission meetings, and then broadening the term Zoom to other forms of video conference, I assume that those kinds of minor edits are consistent with the motion that just passed.
And let me ask the maker of the motion, Councilmember Badami.
Yes, I would add those to the motion. Thank you.
Okay, and the seconder?
Okay, yes.
And so for all those, can I do verbal affirmation that that was your understanding as well? Am I allowed to do that, Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that clarification. And council members, if we could take a break, it's 9:19 before we move into the budget. If it's 9:20, a 5-minute break. Thank you. Back, everyone. I'll wait a couple more seconds for Mr. Rennie as I text him.
All right, just taking my dog out.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Okay, we are now to agenda item 4. And if I could ask Ms. Pravetti to provide a staff report. So.
Thank you, Mayor and Town Council. The item before you are a couple of resolutions to memorialize your decisions regarding the fiscal year 21-22 operating budget and capital improvement programs. These are required, so that way we have a clear close to the fiscal year and we've documented the decisions moving forward. In addition, you'll see that there are some budget adjustments for the current fiscal year, again, to acknowledge the actions that you took a couple of weeks ago. And staff is available to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pravetti. And so council members, I look to you for questions before we open it up to the public. Councilmember Hudas. So.
I had a number of questions of staff, Mayor, not so much concerning the details of the budget, but concerning the applicability of the guidance regarding the American Rescue Plan Act. Is it appropriate to ask those now, or should I hold those until after the public comment?
Let's ask them now because they may provide thought for anyone in the public to provide comment on.
Okay, then I have a few questions, if I may.
Of course.
First of all, I would like to just say that I fully support the measures that were taken on the budget at the last meeting, and I do not wish to reopen those. I think, although there were a number of items that I didn't agree with, there weren't that many, and I think in the end we reached a good solution for the town. But I did want to point out that with the use, for the first time, of the ARPA funds, the town will be under some scrutiny, potentially an audit or other actions that may occur. And so I just want to make sure that we are properly using the ARPA funds as they are described in the budget and in the resolutions that go with it. So those are the questions that I have. I want to make sure that our budget documents and our resolutions are factually correct, and that our actions comply with section 603C1 of ARPA. And to that end, I wanted to just know, will there be other memoranda or resolutions regarding the appropriation of ARPA funds that are identified in the budget? I know there are other funds that we may use later, but for those items that are covered in the budget, will there be additional memoranda or resolutions?
Ms. Pravetti, can you start off?
Thank you. I will start off and then I'll be asking Assistant Town Manager Arn Andrews to join me. We first of all would like to assure the Town Council that staff has been attending trainings offered by the National League of Cities. Members of U.S. Treasury Department itself has been part of those trainings, so we've had the ability to ask questions directly. We've been consulting with experts on the utilization of ARPA, and particularly as it pertains to the revenue issues, we've been handling that calculation according to guidance. I just also want to let everyone know that our Finance Commission chair has requested that the calculation be a topic to the next Finance Commission meeting. So those of you who are really interested can join us on June 14th when we'll dive into those details. So, and all is welcome. And then in terms of the resolutions, this resolution sets forth the decisions made to date regarding the ARPA funding for the various purposes that the council has indicated. Your actions in early April in terms of providing additional support to our nonprofits, that was taken care of by those motions. So at this point, we don't have any additional resolutions needed for this particular budget, but there are still unspent ARPA monies, and we will make sure that we document that appropriately for council consideration. But let me turn to our assistant town manager who's been tracking this very closely for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Town Council. As the town manager stated, there's a couple pieces to ARPA. One is, and I believe it was already alluded to, because we're receiving funds over $750,000, that will subject us to single audit rules. And so there will be an audit by our auditor, probably in consultation with the whole national auditing community, as they all try to figure out what they're going to utilize in terms of their guidelines in a process to do a single audit of ARPA funds, because that's going to transpire throughout the entire nation. And then there's the guidance that we received from Treasury, and it's actually referred to as the interim guidance because it's not even the final guidance yet. In the webinars that we attend, they don't anticipate final guidance until probably sometime in the middle of July. And so there could be additional changes to staff's understanding of appropriate use of ARPA. The concept of ARPA, based on everything we've learned, it was meant to be flexible because they wanted to move quickly. They knew that there were going to continue to be policy I's and T's that needed to be dotted and crossed, but they wanted to let communities know that funds were coming to the communities for certain eligible uses. To date, staff believes what council has done meets the 4 eligibility requirements under ARPA. The interim guidance also had communities start to calculate what they referred to as the baseline general revenue. To the extent that we've learned through these webinars and other areas, the interpretation of that, we believe we have followed those guidelines, and that the dollar amount that was provided in the budget document is a correct calculation to date. That's not to say that additional guidance from Treasury may or may not change things, but to date, staff believes we have followed the intent of the law, the guidance that's been given, and through these webinars that we have done it accordingly. Then there's also kind of the expense side of the conversation, where ARPA is intended to kind of be a follow-up of the original CARES Act fund. And so when the town received roughly $388,000 in CARES Act monies at the very beginning of the pandemic, there were certain eligible uses for those, and ARPA wants to make sure that basically communities don't use funding for the same thing twice. And so to date, staff is confident that any of the things we used CARES Act funding for have not been considered or have been utilized for ARPA. So there's still a lot to this legislation. To date, staff believes we are in compliance. We will continue to get additional guidance. And as I mentioned, it will be subject to the single audit. And so at some point, the auditing community is going to have to determine what principles they're going to follow to audit their clients.
Yes, Councilmember Hudis.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. And I'm certainly not going to torture the council or the public on the baseline revenue calculation. I think it's really appropriate that the Finance Commission take a look at that, and then if they have recommendations, that'll come to council. So I really had just 2 questions. In the resolution, we use the language used for revenue replacement and balancing the budget. Is that language consistent with the guidance that says, quote, for the provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue due to COVID-19 public health emergency relative to revenues collected in the most recent full fiscal year prior to the emergency. That is the language in the guidance, I believe, and is the language in our resolution consistent with that, and does it go far enough to explain that is what we're trying to achieve?
I think you raise a good point. I think staff, utilized the terminology revenue reduction to coincide with the ARPA language, but then further acknowledged that our revenue reduction resulted in the need to do budget stabilization. And so in that regard, the first part of the whereas recognizes the ARPA language. And then the second part was just our acknowledgement that in addition to having reductions in revenues, those reductions resulted in budgetary consequences and deficits.
And if it's the will of the council, we could certainly add additional whereas language to quote directly from the ARPA. So we're happy to make, to clarify that particular whereas statement, if that would give more comfort to the council.
Yeah, I personally think that would be a great addition. I think it might help during an audit. But just to clarify, so staff believes that the language used for revenue replacement and balancing the budget is consistent with that guidance. Is that correct?
That's correct. And to the town manager's comment, we can definitely make sure that the language from ARPA is more clearly representative of the whereas, to make sure that, at least in the context of revenue replacement, that it mirrors each other. Staff, as I mentioned, just took the next step of saying that revenue reduction for us also resulted in budgetary consequences. Not every community had deficits as a result of their revenue reductions.
Right. And thank you. I had one other question, and that is, I believe 1,362,910 of ARPA funds in FY 2021. Is it clear that none of those funds were used to cover pre-award costs, such as those that were incurred prior to March 3, 2021? Could you ascertain that? Because I believe that would be a problem.
And it's my understanding that the general revenue calculation is a separate calculation for revenue reduction and is not necessarily tied to the concept of having expenditures charged twice.
And so as a follow-up, were funds used under ARPA that were pre-award basis?
So
those that were they incurred prior to March 3, 2021?
So the budget as a whole incurs expenses throughout the entire fiscal year. As we move to the close of the fiscal year, we calculate what our deficit is versus our revenues. On the general revenue side of the ARPA conversation, they have municipalities just calculating what the anticipated revenue would have been. And that calculation is happening outside of an expense calculation.
Okay, so I'm still not completely clear. My understanding is that we are not permitted to use ARPA funds for pre-award, meaning those before March 3rd, 2021. Do we have the ability to distinguish that?
So I believe what they're referring to is, once again, ARPA is supposed to pick up where the CARES Act left off, and they don't want ARPA funds utilized for things the CARES Act already paid for. I believe that is the reference you're referring to, because they want to make sure that federal programs don't pay for the same expense twice. I don't believe the general revenue rule is tied to the expense conversation.
Okay, so your answer is you're not saying that pre-award costs are definitely not being covered by ARPA. What you're saying is you don't think that that applies.
I don't think it applies, but also mathematically, if we have a $30 million budget over a 12-month cycle and we're talking about 1.3 million, chances are very good if that was the intent of Treasury, we could justify that those expenses were incurred in the last month or two.
Okay, thank you. Those were my questions. I appreciate the suggestion of improving the whereas to reference the language that's in the interim guidance. I think that would be helpful. I'm not sure how that would come about. Is it required to make a motion to do that, or is how would that work?
You can just, if you are making a motion to approve item 4, then you would just add that to your motion and staff will take care of it administratively.
Okay.
Any further questions, council member?
No.
Okay, council members, any other? So I am going to open public comment. Anyone in the attendance would like to speak, please raise your hand. I see one. I see two. So let's start with Lindley Hogan.
Hello again. It's almost comical that I'm even talking right now. I'm not sure if any of you are really listening to what we're concerned about and what we're saying to all of you. It doesn't seem right. I think most people in the United States would agree that this whole diversity, equity, inclusion thing, this whole thing is just completely so wrong. And I can't believe that white people are putting this on other white people now. And I'm not sure what's so unclear about what's going on, but it's not right. And for you to be putting money, even if it's from ARPA, it must be coming from our tax dollars. So it's just really sad what's going on in our country and what the people here in town aren't even fighting for. Nobody even cares. Nobody even cares what's going on anymore in our country. Like here in California, we're just like this communist country, all crazy. Like I never knew how California was so crazy. I've lived here my whole life. I've never heard of such things. And you guys aren't even fighting for anything. You're just going along with it. Like the sun's just always going to come up for you the next day and everything's always going to be good. I'm seeing concentration camps in my head. I'm seeing our guns being taken away so we can't fight for our rights. I'm seeing us eating algae and, and like depending on government for everything and hoping that they actually feed us and give us clean water. I mean, if we even survive the poison that they're putting in us now. But I'm really sad that all of you on this town council and the attorney and Catherine Summers, and that you're actually falling for this very ridiculous concept that you can be less white and that all of a sudden racism is flipped on its butt. Like it's cool to be racist now. Like I've never heard of such a thing that you would even call someone by other than describing someone because they have brown hair, brown eyes, curly hair, tall, black, white, whatever, who cares? But when everything comes down to race, really, the color of my skin makes me bad. And now I have to put up with Black Lives Matter people telling me I'm bad when they're all criminals and rioters and pathetic little Marxist army people. I'm just embarrassed for all of you. This is coming from my heart. I didn't write this. I'm embarrassed for each of you that you're so ignorant. Like, what country are you from? Why don't you go back to whatever your country is that you come from? Because you don't belong here. Thank you.
Catherine Summers.
Okay, I'm gonna unmute here. So I am actually standing up for what I believe in. And I just wanted to bring up a couple things about the ARPA funds. I wanted to make sure, council, that you are spending those, and I do believe you are spending those dollars for the right reasons. But I did want to make sure that we are consistent with, what the rules say. I want to make sure that we're not filling in the gaps or backfilling, I guess, for, you talked about the CARES Act, and I think there was $355,000 that was granted to the town for the CARES Act, and that, backfilled some of the deficits that we experienced early on in the pandemic. Now we are at a whole different juncture, and I just want to make sure that what you are using those ARPA funds now are, in fact, legitimate reasons. This is a big decision tonight, and I guess that's actually why I was happy that the consent item was pulled, because does it have to be a consent item, or can it kind of roll? And can we kind of see where our deficits actually really are? Because that number, that deficit number of what we experienced through the pandemic is quite unclear. And I have not heard, is it $1.3 million? Is it 1.6? Was it the, $2 million that we experienced from the TOT? Like, we have not really heard a specific number that we are trying to backfill. And so I just want to make sure, council, that honestly, that we don't blow it here, because I do care, regardless of whether other people are saying about how I feel about things. I think it's really important that you make the good decisions. I know you will, but maybe we don't have to make a decision on this tonight. Maybe we just kind of see how it all plays out and see where these the sales tax revenues come in, and property tax revenues, and the Wayfarer taxes, and the, so I just want to throw caution to the wind. It's my last attempt on this, and I appreciate your taking the time, but I'm just advocating for the businesses and the people. Thanks.
Thanks, Catherine. Next speaker is C. Roy.
Good evening again. I wanted to comment on two of the budget items. Number one is the $55,000 for the expert on, I believe it's critical race theory and racial issues. That money could probably go to much better use, helping the people that were really damaged from the lockdown. And those are the people usually at the bottom rungs, so they can use it. It's much better spent there than some elitist expert, in my humble opinion. Number two, wanted to please do not fund the stationary license plate reader. There were far too many problems with LPRs, or license plate readers, and nowhere near enough benefits. The money can be spent better elsewhere. I'm going to quote fairly extensively from a Car and Driver article from March of 2021, so it's very fresh, very relevant. And some of the problems that they identify come from two very reputable sources: the Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF, as well as the ACLU. And they basically require any law enforcement agency to adhere to strict privacy principles to prevent the government from tracking our movements on a massive scale. That was a quote from ACLU. And the EFF stated that drivers don't have a choice here. The government requires vehicles to have plates, and now they track all the plates. Most states, moving on to some other comments, most states do not have explicit regulations on LPRs, and their use is fairly wide open, just inviting potential abuse. The only one major item is, well, one, they can keep their records, which even then sometimes that is not maintained or obeyed. So LPRs are basically flying totally under the radar. In fact, the FBI in 2011 wondered if such data collection was even legal. That was back in 2012, actually, they made that. And taken, here's another quote, taken in the aggregate, LPRs can paint an intimate portrait of a driver's life and even chill First Amendment protected activity. That's from the EFF. And this technology can be used to target drivers, sensitive places such as health centers, immigration clinics, union halls, religious worship, etc. Lastly, there's also errors in the reading of the plates many times, and it puts a burden back on the actual driver to straighten it out so it is no longer innocent until proven guilty. It's presumed guilty, and then they have to spend the money. Thank you very much. Have a great night. And by the way, I do appreciate the discussion that went on there as far as transparency of citizens in comments and pulled items. That was a very refreshing dialogue. Thank you.
Speaker, Suzanne?
Hi, thank you very much. I just read through the cities and what you can and cannot use the funds for critical race theory, teaching you all through that and have clear understanding of what you can and cannot use those funds for. Secondly, regarding the license plate readers, I don't know if you're all very familiar with what goes on in China. They track and trace everybody, facial recognition, and all kinds of other things that we find terrible. And you want to put that here in our town? Tracking and tracing people by their license plate? There is absolutely no justification for that whatsoever. Regardless if it's accurate or inaccurate, it shouldn't be there in the first place. So I hope that you're going to consider my comments, because you know what? Many of you came from other countries or your family, like I said before. Why did you come to America? Why did your family come here and work so hard? And you want to bring that crap to my country? No, thank you.
Next speaker is Be Nice. Kind of like that name.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, sweet. Okay, so I just want to say one thing about the CRT. First of all, I'm Latina, but I was born here. I'm American, of course. I'm a veteran. Just throwing that out there. Served my country proudly. I recently came back from being in Kentucky 26 days, and it was a culture shock coming back. Because when I was over there, even though there was like 95, 96% white people, I was never scared or nervous, if that makes any sense. Because, you know, nobody sees color and they shouldn't. When you keep bringing up race, people are going to keep talking about it, just like the media. So if you put racism, CRT in these schools, you're going to teach them to hate each other. And that's not right. I never learned that in school, and I was fine. Children should not be learning that. So if you keep this up, it's only going to rise more tension. I mean, that's all I got to say. But if you keep it up, you're literally going to make people racist. That's what I think. By keeping CRT or implementing this, you're keeping racism alive. I think that's it.
Thank you for your comments. Any further speakers? Seeing no further speakers, I'm closing public testimony. I bring the conversation back to our council. Vice Mayor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple questions. I think a couple members of the community are misinformed. I wanted to make sure. Somebody commented that we're spending $55,000 on CRT. I think they're referring to the funds for destination marketing to get people to come to Los Gatos. Did we have a 55K item for CRT in our budget?
No.
No, they're confused with destination marketing, correct? or we think they are anyway. Second question was, there's a comment about license plate readers. I thought that those were only meant to be stationary readers, to be looking for stolen cars that come into town, which normally are how the robberies are done in our town. Isn't that the purpose of those license plate readers that is being discussed?
That is correct. And through the consent calendar, that item has already been addressed this evening. So the item before you right now is the budget.
Yeah.
Actually, Ms. Pravetti, I'm sorry, it was a bit gargled on my end, so I can't tell if it was garbled on someone else's end.
Yeah, so in other words, there's nothing in our budget item for license plate readers to be tracking people, correct? Make sure she hears me.
Sorry, my earphones may not be working properly. So could you repeat the question?
Yeah, I just wanted to re-ask. So there's nothing in our budget tonight, this budget item, to buy license plate readers to track people in town, correct?
That's correct. This is really a crime prevention mechanism, and we're using grant funding, as explained in the staff report, for this purpose. So it's really to solve crimes and prevent crimes. We're not tracking individual movements of citizens.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hudis?
Thank you. I had one question and then I'm prepared to make a motion if that's appropriate.
Yes, go ahead.
The question is, we received some correspondence from residents about cuts to our police force or a hiring freeze on our police force. In the final form of the budget, are there any cuts or is there any hiring freeze of town employees?
No, the council was very clear with its motions that there would be no hiring freeze in this particular budget. And there are no cuts to the police department.
Okay. I'm prepared to make a motion, Mayor, if it's the right time to do that.
Yes, please go ahead.
So I move to adopt the resolution approving the Town of Los Gatos fiscal year 2021 operating budget and fiscal year 21-22 to 25-26 capital improvement program, new appropriations, other approved adjustments, other council actions on May 18, 2021, minor corrections and carry forward appropriations. Also adopt a resolution approving commitment of fund balances under GASB 54 and approve FY 2021 budget adjustments as outlined on page 2 of the staff report. And I would add 2 items to that. One is to recommend to the town attorney to include language that in the resolution that mirrors the language in the interim guidance regarding provision of government services. And the second is that the revenue baseline will be discussed by the Finance Commission, and if there are recommendations from the Finance Commission, those will be considered by the council at a later time. That's the motion.
Thank you. And do I have a second? Councilmember Badami.
Second.
Okay. Any questions or comments to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Councilmember Badami.
Aye.
Councilmember Risto.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Rennie.
Aye.
Councilmember Hudis.
Aye.
I also vote aye, and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And thank you for the clarifying questions that showed that the miscommunication that was occurring based on the staff report. So with that, there are no other items on our agenda. And so I adjourn tonight's meeting. Have a good night, everyone.